Let us begin. Hello, and welcome to Lunch Break with GABC. This is episode 15. I'm your host, Ashley Mateos, coming to you live from the Carl-Schurz-Haus. For those of you who don't know, the Carl-Schurz-Haus is the German-American Institute here in Freiburg, Germany. We offer a diverse cultural program with English language courses for all ages, Education USA advising, and we also have a vibrant all-English library. We are a nonprofit institute supported in part by our members. The main goal of the Carl-Schurz-Haus is to facilitate a transatlantic discourse across all areas, ranging from literature to politics to business, which brings us here today. In addition to coordinating the English language courses for adults at the Carl-Schurz-Haus and in companies, I'm also head of our German American Business Community, or GABC. We provide events centered around transatlantic business relations, professional development, and networking. I would like to take this time to thank you for choosing to spend your lunch break with us. Here with me today is Rebecca Watson, Senior Development and AI Adoption Specialist at Jedox, and Philipp Nuernberger of Nuernberger Legal, who's one of our GABC members. We're going to first hear from Rebecca, who will give us some tips and best practices for using AI at work, and then I will interview Philipp about his international legal experience and established law practice in Freiburg. So let's start with a little introduction for Rebecca. Rebecca has been working at Jedox since 2018, and I'm happy to say that she is actually a GABC success story in that she got her job through a GABC networking event after pivoting her career from marketing and editing to data science. Rebecca is currently the lead developer on the AI Wizards for Jedox, which means she helps people understand and adopt Jedox AI capabilities, whether they're customers, partners, or her coworkers at Jedox. She's very adamant about promoting fairness in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and she's here today to give us some tips and best practices for using AI at work. And so with that, I will say, take it away, Rebecca.
Thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. I appreciate it. I'm going to just share these slides here. As well, thank you everyone for being here. I am looking forward to our chat today. So firstly, I want to talk, before I talk about how to use AI or, how to improve your use of AI for those who already use it, I want to begin at the beginning. And that is that data is at the core of how all AI tools function. And the more data they have, the better their algorithms are. So a lot of these tools that we're going to talk about today use the data that you input to train their models. And this means that before we do anything with AI at work, we need to know a few things. For example, does your company have an AI use policy already? If so, what is it? We're not allowed to bring everything into our jobs that are that is AI generated. Are there places where you're able to, or where it's forbidden? Not, and of course, not all companies probably have an AI use policy yet, because a lot of these tools, particularly like large language models or LLMs, have only been around for about 3 years now. And so that leads me to my next point, which is companies, please, please, please make an AI policy. There are a lot of people using AI tools already. Oops, sorry. If you see this graphic right here at the bottom, you can see that while 40% of companies offer a business subscription to these LLMs, 90% of people are actually already regularly using them. This comes from an MIT study that came out a few months ago about the state of business, or AI in business. So a lot of the folks that are using their own personal account are often using free accounts, quote, free accounts. And that means all the questions they're asking, any of the data that they're introducing to these tools is being used to train the algorithms. So really, it's not a free service they're using. Their data, and sometimes company data, is what's paying for it, which is why I want to stress here that we should all be careful when we are using a quote free account in any case, but particularly when it comes to work, because we don't own the data from our company. It's really important when we use these tools that we don't give them sensitive data like financial numbers or personal information of customers. And of course, that seems really obvious maybe to some of us, but there are other kinds of data that might seem less so. For example, let's say you ask ChatGPT to write up a strategy summary after you shared with it your company roadmap. Or you paste some group chats in after you get back from a holiday. Say you've got just like loads of group chats and you just want a quick update, a summary while you were gone. That is company information. So we need to be thoughtful about how we are using AI tools. And if you find yourself in a situation where you would benefit from the LLMs on using, sensitive company data, this is the time to ask your company to provide a subscription. But they need to check their data policy. Most tools will agree not to use company data for training when you do use a subscription service, but it's also, of course, best to double check that service agreement, maybe with your legal team, to make sure you're not sharing the data. And then additionally, once you're started to use the tool, you need to make sure that the settings are such that you're not sharing that data either. So let's move on here. So another thing I want to touch on before we discuss tips and tricks on using AI at work is this concept of work slop. The Harvard Business Review did a study to understand the impact of this phenomenon, and it's like the results came out in September, and it's a pretty jarring sort of results to share. Work slop is essentially like passing AI generated content as your own work that's passable, but it's actually like lacking in substance and it doesn't do much to get any part of your task closer to the done mark. So the concept isn't a new one. Maybe you've experienced before, like going to a meeting where there's no agenda and nobody has any action items at the end, and it's just a lot of multitasking within the meeting. You feel like, okay, well, that was kind of a waste of time. We didn't get anything done. I don't feel like we're moving closer to our goal. This can happen with AI enabled work slop now too. So an example might be you talk to a colleague and ask, hey, can you create a summary of this report for the executive team? And you get a generic summary back in like 2 minutes. And basically when you start to read it, you're realizing this doesn't reflect points that are relevant to my leadership team. There's maybe some missing internal language that your company uses, or it doesn't have any real context there. And it's clear because it took 2 minutes to get the summary that they didn't even read the report themselves. So now you, if you don't ask them to redo their work, you're stuck reading the report, interpreting the AI output, and then editing their summary to make it a useful one. And if you haven't seen this yet in your own work, it's definitely consider yourself lucky. But those of us who have experienced this, I'd like to say we know it when we see it, because it's basically shifting the workload of the person asked to do the task onto the receiver, the person who asked for this task to be done. According to this Harvard Business Review study, the time spent on this is really high each instance, and it costs the company around €161 a month. And if you consider the prevalence, according to the survey, the costs when you add that to the many workers in the business is crazy, like €8 million a year lost in productivity for like a company of 10,000 workers. And that speaks really to like the productivity side of it. But what another part, if you could look on the right here of this slide, this graphic, we can talk about something that is also really important, is that it's affecting working relationships. According to this survey, people who received work slop from a colleague have considered this colleague less creative, reliable, trustworthy. So it's a really damaging situation when we're sending like this low effort AI generated content, and we want to keep it in mind. So I'll go over a little bit more on tips to avoid this, but I just want to make sure that we are also thinking about this when we create and use AI in our work. Excuse me. Okay. All that said, though, I really want to be clear that I do think AI is an incredible tool, right? Obviously, I work with it on the daily, and I think it can really enhance the way we work. So I like to think of AI as a collaborative partner. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use AI. You can use it to brainstorm ideas, like for campaigns, product names, design concepts. You can use it to explore alternative ways of mixing your existing content. You can use ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini to help with that. You can also enhance your decision making. So you can use AI to analyze trends. You can forecast outcomes. You can generate scenario simulations, and that helps you evaluate risks or opportunities. AI tools at Jedox actually can help you do that. There's also the great thing, I call it better, faster Googling, that AI can really get summaries and more sources that you can digest yourself. Let's say you're doing like a market analysis report. Like Perplexity AI is a good research tool for that because it relies on searching the web live, whereas other LLMs rely on pre-trained knowledge. You can also use it just to speed up your admin tasks. So, for example, let's say you're writing a progress report and you have a bunch of bullet points. You can ask the LLM to make it more readable, more formal, however, you want it to look. It's also great for summarizing content. So, like you're sending out slides, a presentation to a group, you can have the LLM summarize it really quickly to put in the email for your colleagues. You can have the LLM summarize other emails you're reading. You can have it summarize legal documents or policy documents for work. One of the most exciting things that I think can happen with AI at work, though, is that we can use company data that we have, because so many companies have a plethora of internal data that can help them make decisions. But before, it would really require a data scientist to help them organize or visualize data. And AI can do that really quickly. This is also, though, where you need to be careful about sharing company data. Tools like Copilot or Jedox AI can help for that. And then there are things that have once seemed impossible that you can now do. For example, let's talk about like an HR team with 5 years worth of employee surveys, and they have all this quantitative or qualitative data like text. They can now put all of that into an LLM, have it summarized, provide year-over-year analysis. It basically takes things that were pushed off as like nice to have or we're too busy for that and makes that possible. And of course, you can do things like offload competitive or repetitive tasks, like scheduling, that kind of thing. Copilot does this really well in all the Microsoft 365 tools. And if you're not a Microsoft fan, you could just ask your LLM for some suggestions because there are a lot of them out there. And then, of course, learning more quickly. I do this a lot where I ask for the LLM to explain really incredibly complex topics to me as quickly as possible. I also use ChatGPT as a tandem partner to improve my German. So AI is definitely helpful there. But with all these great tools, the big question is to how do we avoid putting workload onto our colleagues and costing everyone when it comes to productivity? So this might seem like an extra step, but the more we do it, the faster we'll get. And we have to also consider that AI is saving us a lot of time as well. So it's the idea is basically AI is meant to be a collaborator and not just a little minion. So we're working with it. So let's start with the first point here, and that's to use a critical eye. The AI can come at you with a really authoritative tone, and it can sound like it knows what it's talking about, tell you all like with all the confidence of a scholar that today is Wednesday when you know it is Tuesday. It's an imperfect thing. So you really need to look out for bias and errors and consider that when you're reading through it, which leads me to the point of that it's really tempting to copy and paste with abandon, but you need to take the time to read what you include from a generative AI because anything you get from an LLM is always a first draft. And I think a key point here is that context is really important. The LLM doesn't know your job. It doesn't know the jobs of others you work with, and it doesn't know your team culture. AI doesn't know your tone, your priorities, unless you tell it. So the final result can get lost in all these details. And there are things that you need to think about and ask yourself before you just include something or throw something at a colleague and call it done. Um, Additionally, I think we need to make sure to match AI with our tasks. So let's say we're brainstorming, let's use ChatGPT, but analyzing data, maybe it's a tool like Jedox AI, and a repetitive like admin task, Zapier with AI is a really good one. So don't force one a general purpose AI tool to do something that another tool might do better. And I think it's important to keep track of how you use AI so that you can reproduce things and also help with transparency if customers or colleagues are asking you for that. And also so you can learn from your mistakes. And finally, I think it's really essential to remember that automating everything can really create more problems than it solves, to focus really on areas where you spend more time that would be high impact and add real value, not just convenience. So that's it for me. I really appreciate you listening. I hope that I've given you some actionable ideas and also some good tips for being a productive user of generative AI.
Thanks so much, Rebecca.
Happy to help.
I think that was really interesting and also quite pertinent because work slop is, I mean, you're seeing it across the board in all disciplines and every areas of work, and it can be so easy and turn into a crutch as well. So I think you made some great points that it's important to be mindful and use it as like a colleague, right? Work with it and not make it, don't think that it's replacing work that you're doing because it really isn't.
That's right. It isn't your minion. It is there to help and yeah, make things easier, but it's not going to do your job.
Right. It's your friend, not your minion.
There you go.
Very nice. Thank you. So now I would like to introduce Philipp of Nuernberger Legal. I'm going to spotlight you as well so everyone can see you as well as me. Quick introduction for Philipp. Philipp is an attorney in the US and Germany who focuses on international business law. He has experience with leading international law firms in New York, London, and Paris, and has since established his own practice here in Freiburg. Beyond his legal practice, he also has advised and served on corporate and nonprofit boards. I'm very happy to have him here as one of our GABC members because of his German American experience. And we've also already chatted about potential event collaboration in the future. So I'm very much looking forward to furthering those discussions. But for now, let's hear from Philipp himself. Thank you so much for joining me for our 15th episode today. I'd like to start with maybe just a brief overview of your background, and maybe you could also detail the types of services that you offer.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Ashley. It's a real pleasure to find that Carl-Schurz-Haus and you and the German American business community here in Freiburg. I've moved back to Freiburg after 20 years away in January of this year, and it was nice to have this German American, home basically in Freiburg. The past 10 years I spent abroad, as you said, in New York and London in big US firms, and then also in-house with a sort of a German American company, international company, but founded by Germans in the US, which was interesting. And based on this transatlantic experience, I started my own firm about a year and a half ago and moved to Freiburg about a year ago. I have a small office in Berlin, and my main home is Freiburg. And my clients are really from startups, entrepreneurs, investors, to family-owned, traditional SMEs. And I mostly focus, given my international background, on helping them with their international business, often US business, or also inbound US investors or US entrepreneurs that come to Europe and are active in Germany. And I focus on corporate matters, general commercial work, and then also transactions, meaning sale and purchase of small companies. That's sort of my main focus: international expansion, corporate transactions, these sort of things.
Yeah. And so you have spent significant time abroad, but like you said, after 20 years, you've returned to Germany. So what has it been establishing your law practice here in Germany in comparison to the experience you've had abroad so far?
It's been really interesting to come from a culture that is, based on, now this is a bit technical, but based on pragmatism, basically the Anglo-Saxon, way of doing business and also legal world is very pragmatic, very hands-on, very sort of in some ways improvised. I love that saying, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So you don't try to plan everything ahead. Whereas in Germany and sort of the civil law tradition you have in continental Europe, it's much more in some ways, formalistic and a bit by the book and dogmatic in certain things. And that certainly was an interesting cultural experience to come back after having spent quite some time in this, Anglo-Saxon mindset and now being back in Germany. Certain things take a little longer, are a bit more formalistic, but then other things obviously are, advantageous that you have a high degree of certainty with many things. Takes a bit longer, but then you can be sure that things are, well documented and so forth. People are generally very welcoming and warm, but I did notice that in the US, networking is just a bit faster, like most things are faster. And being back here in Germany, I mean, luckily I have that cultural, upbringing and knowledge. But I see with some of my clients that come from abroad that they need to get used to that, a bit slower way of getting into contact with people. It needs more time to sort of break through the barrier and make your connections. But once you've done that, they stick, they hold.
For sure, that's a huge cultural difference within the business communities is that networking aspect and how to
Yes.
approach connections and how
Yes.
to proceed about making new business in that case too. Whereas
Absolutely.
in the US, you're probably looking to jump in right
Yes.
away, whereas in the more European mindset, you're first getting to know each other and slowly building up that relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, I think our GABC community would also be interested in hearing a little bit more about this cross-border expertise that you have. So maybe you could give an example of how you might advise like a startup or a solo entrepreneur versus a family company or SME looking to expand internationally.
Yes, no, of course. So the advantage I have is that I'm admitted in New York and I'm admitted in Germany, so I can help them really navigate both legal systems and both cultures, and that often comes in handy when a startup after a certain time they or a lot of them look to the US both as a funding source because US investors, I mean, the equity tickets, the investment amounts are just so much higher than what you can get in Europe. And so that's interesting for startups when they look at the US. And I can obviously advise on that, how you make use of that US deep-pocketed venture capital environment. And then it's also a question of having a consumer market in the US and a B2B market that's incredibly large and integrated and speaks one language. When you compare that to the European Union, it's also an incredibly large market, but you still have the language barriers between the countries. And so I help startups expand to the US. Sometimes it's only that they get some US investment. Sometimes it's that they open a US subsidiary, a US corporation, and try to penetrate the US market and sell their products there. That's one example. With the SMEs, often they have long-standing US business, meaning that they're exporting. And then at some point, or they have some distributor in the US, some business partners there, and at some point they consider maybe starting their own, subsidiary there, or maybe even a production. Obviously, with the tariffs, some people were thinking about, starting production in the US. So that's another topic. Usually, they do have their experience with the US, and I help them just, get to the next level of expansion, basically. And then there's also solopreneurs. People have creative ideas, and I just help them, look after basically the boring admin side of things, starting a company and running a company, making sure you don't get into trouble with, tax office and so forth. Obviously, hand in hand with tax advisors.
For sure. So maybe a bit boring, but entirely necessary to do, right?
Yes, and better to do it early and avoid that it, blows up in your face later on. And what I see more and more, that's why it was incredibly interesting to hear Rebecca's presentation, is that particularly in the startup community and solopreneurs, they rely, or they try to rely on ChatGPT, and then they feel, okay, I need that last little quantum of certainty, and so I go to the lawyer and I bring them what ChatGPT drafted for me, and that's often a fun exercise, because sometimes actually creates more work when you work through a contract than pulling out your own. But I do use ChatGPT a lot for my own work, for research and so forth. So that's another point that differentiates the different types of clients. How tech friendly and tech open are they, or tech obsessed even, and others very conservative, and obviously. So my first task is always to listen for a long while to understand where they stand, where they come from, my clients, and then help them find also cost efficient solutions to their problems.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And so do you work solo within your firm, or do you also have colleagues that
I have 3 colleagues with who I work regularly on matters. They're off counsel to my firms, or where, that's sort of the most flexible arrangement. 1 in London, 2 in Munich. And so with Munich, Freiburg, and Berlin, we're really covering 3 cities with incredibly strong, entrepreneurial communities and startups, and also geographically, 3 cities and basically 3 corners of Germany. And then obviously with London and in the US, I have colleagues that I cooperate with. That's another sort of advantage. I always say, basically, I'm bringing you the network and the experience of big law, which is, big law, the expression for these humongous law firms, in which I've worked as well, with thousands of lawyers. So I do have that international network. I do have that experience, but because obviously my, overhead is much lower, I can work for much more affordable rates. That's really sort of my niche, is to bring that big law experience, that international experience, and to SMEs and to smaller companies for who these big firms are really, beyond what they could afford.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything new that you have planned or upcoming that you'd like to share at this point?
It's really just about, getting my feet on the ground here and networking with people. And so I'm incredibly excited to be now part of the German-American business community and of the Carl-Schurz-Haus. And I look forward to the next events and hopefully network with people in person.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that note, if anybody would like to learn more about Nuernberger Legal or speak with Philipp directly, please do reach out to him via his website or even on LinkedIn. I believe Rebecca is also on LinkedIn if you would like to connect with her there as well. And you can see other GABC updates via our LinkedIn showcase page. And well, if you like what we do and want to broaden your network while supporting your local German-American Institute, I encourage you to like, share, donate, and/or become a member with us. As a nonprofit organization, the Carl-Schurz-Haus relies on the support of our local and virtual community members. So if you aren't a member yet and are interested in becoming one, please visit our website or just send me an email. I'll be happy to help you. As for upcoming GABC events, we do have our annual Thanksgiving business dinner that is for members only, so we will be sending out invites relatively shortly. And also, please be on the lookout for early 2026. We're going to have a member showcase here at the Carl-Schurz-Haus, where we have our solopreneur members as well as our larger business company members that come in, and people can meet them face to face and network in that style. More info to come. And for anyone looking to improve their English skills, the Carl-Schurz-Haus also offers general and business English courses, both online and in person. If you miss an event, we do upload all of our recordings to our YouTube page. I think that's probably it for all of my notes right now. I would like to once again thank Rebecca and Philipp for joining me today. It's been highly informative, and we did it in less than 30 minutes. Bravo. Thanks to all of our viewers and listeners for learning while you lunch. You can already save the date for the next lunch break with GBC. That will be on February 3rd. So I hope to see you once again, either online or in person at the next Carl-Schurz-Haus event. Please enjoy the rest of your lunch break, everyone, and have a nice day.